Amy Rodriguez walked into the giant crystal room. Her old black boots made small clicking sounds on the smooth, shiny floor. The room was so big that her voice would echo if she spoke too loud. All around her stood the strangest creatures she had ever seen. The aliens were tall as trees and made of something that looked like living glass. They had 6 arms each and faces that sparkled when the light hit them. These were the Zeltharians, and they were the judges who would decide if Amy could join the most dangerous pilot school in the galaxy. Amy felt very small standing there. Her uniform was plain and simple compared to the beautiful crystal beings around her. But she kept her back straight and her chin up. She had come too far to show fear now. The biggest Zeltharian moved forward. When it talked, a machine changed its words into English. "Human Cadet," it said in a voice like wind chimes. "We have studied your people for many years. We know what you can do and what you cannot do." Floating screens appeared in the air between them. The screens showed numbers, charts, and graphs. Every piece of information told the same story. Humans were weak. Humans were slow. Humans were not built for space combat. "Your species joined our galactic alliance only 37 years ago," the alien judge continued. "In all that time, not one human has ever completed our elite pilot program. Not one has even come close." Captain Lisa Warren stood beside Amy. She was Amy's commanding officer and had fought hard to get Amy this chance. Captain Warren looked worried. She knew how bad the numbers were. "Let me explain why humans fail," the crystal alien said. Its 6 arms moved to point at different screens. "Your reflexes are 2.3 times slower than the average Catherian pilot. Your eyes can only see in one direction at a time. Your brain processes information at speeds we consider primitive." More aliens came into the room. There were creatures with scales that changed color. Others had compound eyes like giant insects. Some looked like they were made of shadow and mist. All of them were there to watch Amy fail. "We have run thousands of computer simulations," the Zeltharian judge said. "We have tested human pilots in every possible scenario. The results are always the same." It paused and looked directly at Amy. "A human cadet has exactly a 2.1% chance of surviving the first week of our program. The chance of actually graduating is so small our computers call it 0. The room became very quiet. Amy could hear her own heartbeat. She could feel dozens of alien eyes watching her, waiting to see her give up. Most species that heard numbers like these would politely thank the judges and leave. Amy was not most species. A slow smile spread across her face. She looked up at the towering crystal alien and laughed. The sound echoed through the huge chamber, making several aliens step back in surprise. 1%? Amy said, her voice clear and strong. "Sir, that sounds like more than enough to me." The machine that translated the alien's words made confused beeping sounds. "Cadet Rodriguez, perhaps you do not understand the meaning of these statistics." "Oh, I understand them perfectly," Amy replied. She was still smiling, but now her eyes had a dangerous glint in them. "You're telling me I have a chance, that's all any human needs to hear." She turned to face the entire room full of aliens. Her voice got louder and more confident with each word. "You want to know what makes humans different from every other species in this galaxy? We don't look at a 2% chance and see failure. We look at it and see possibility." The aliens began talking to each other in their strange languages. Some sounded worried. Others seemed curious. A few made sounds that might have been laughter. Amy kept talking. "My ancestors didn't become the top predators on Earth by accepting that the odds were against them. They didn't build cities and spaceships by giving up when things looked impossible. And they sure as hell didn't earn our place in your alliance by backing down from a challenge." Captain Warren watched Amy with growing amazement. She had known Amy was brave. But this was something else entirely. This was the kind of confidence that moved mountains. "Every human success story starts the same way," Amy continued. "Someone tells us something is impossible. Someone shows us numbers that prove we can't win. Someone explains very carefully why we should just give up and go home." She paused and looked around the room. "And then we prove them wrong." The head judge leaned forward. Its crystal body cast rainbow patterns on the floor. Your enthusiasm is noted, Cadet Rodriguez. But enthusiasm does not change physics. It does not make slow reflexes faster or weak bodies stronger. No, Amy agreed. But it does something better. It makes us stubborn enough to find another way. She walked closer to the floating screens full of statistics. All these numbers assume I'm going to fight fair. They assume I'm going to play by the same rules as everyone else. They assume I'm going to try to be better than my opponents at the things they're naturally good at. Amy turned back to the judges. That's where your computers made their mistake. Humans don't fight fair. We fight to win. The room buzzed with excited conversations. Several alien species were known for their honor and nobility in combat. The idea of deliberately fighting unfairly was shocking to many of them. 1%, Amy said again, her voice cutting through the noise. Do you know what else has about a 2% chance of success? A human trying to become a professional athlete, or starting a successful business, or becoming a movie star. She smiled again. We beat those odds every single day back home. The crystal judge was quiet for a long moment. Its 6 arms moved in complex patterns that might have been a form of thinking. Finally it spoke. Very well, Cadet Rodriguez. Your application is accepted. However, you must understand what you are agreeing to. The elite pilot program is not merely difficult. It is designed to push candidates beyond their absolute limits. Many students die during training. Then I guess I'll have to be one of the ones who doesn't, Amy said simply. The acceptance paperwork took hours to complete. Amy had to sign forms acknowledging the danger. She had to list her next of kin in case she died. She had to waive any right to sue if the training destroyed her mind or body. With each signature, Amy felt the weight of human expectations settling on her shoulders. Everyone on Earth would be watching her progress. She wasn't just representing herself anymore. She was carrying the hopes and dreams of 8 billion people who wanted to prove that humans belonged among the stars. 3 days later, Amy found herself on a transport ship heading toward Kepler Station. The military academy was built in the empty space between 2 massive gas planets. Through the small window beside her seat, she could see training ships flying in formation. Their pilots were already weeks ahead of her in the program. The other passengers on the transport were the most frightening beings Amy had ever seen. There was a Draknari warrior whose scales shifted from black to red as he watched her. 2 Catherian pilots communicated through rapid clicking sounds that hurt Amy's ears. Something that looked like living smoke introduced itself as Whisper of the Voidkin. So, rumbled the Draknari in a voice like grinding stone. You are the human everyone is talking about. I am stone that breaks waves. When we face each other in combat training, I will try to kill you quickly. Amy looked up at the massive alien warrior. He was nearly twice her height and probably weighed as much as a small car. His claws looked sharp enough to cut through metal. Amy Rodriguez, she replied calmly. And I appreciate the thought, but I'm planning to make it more interesting than that. Stone that breaks waves made a sound that might have been laughter. I like this small human. She has spirit. Breaking her will be more satisfying than I expected. As Kepler Station grew larger, in the window, Amy pressed her palm against the cool glass. The academy looked like a small city floating in space with training areas, dormitories, and weapons ranges spread across multiple levels. 0%, she whispered to herself. Let's see what we can do with that. The first week almost broke Amy completely. Every morning began at 5 a.m. with physical training that would have killed most humans. The alien instructors seemed to forget that human bones could break and human muscles could tear. Amy found herself in the medical bay 3 times in her first 5 days, nursing injuries that would have ended the military careers of most soldiers back on Earth. Commander Jake Harrison was the only other human on Kepler Station. He was a liaison officer, there, to help Amy adjust to life among aliens. On her 5th day, he found her sitting on a medical bed with a bandage wrapped around her head. Maybe the board was right, Harrison said gently. He was looking at her medical chart on a glowing screen. There's no shame in admitting when something is beyond human limits. Amy sat up despite the doctor's protests. The alien medic made angry, clicking sounds as she pulled on her training uniform. Did you know that humans are the only species in the Alliance that produces adrenaline in large amounts? She asked. Harrison frowned. That's not exactly true. Other species have similar chemicals. Not like us, Amy said, testing her balance. The head injury made the room spin a little, but she pushed through it. Every other race either evolved past needing emergency chemicals or they never developed them because they didn't need to. Where are you going with this? Harrison asked. Amy stood up and walked toward the door. They think they know what human limits are because they've run tests and studied our normal abilities. But they've never seen what happens when we get desperate. The next morning brought the first major test that could eliminate students from the program. It was called the Kepler Maze, a dangerous obstacle course made of floating asteroids, metal debris, and gravity traps that surrounded the station. Each student had to fly a small fighter ship through the maze while instructors watched from the control room. Amy watched as her fellow students took their turns. Stone that breaks waves completed the course in record time. His Draknari reflexes let him slip through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow. The Catherian twins finished with perfect precision, their compound eyes seeing threats from all directions at once. Whisper of the Voidkin seemed to know where obstacles would be before they appeared, flowing through the course like water. When Amy's turn came, the control room fell silent. She could hear instructors making bets over the communication system, about how quickly she would crash or ask for help. Cadet Rodriguez, came the voice of Flight Commander Zenth through her helmet radio. You are cleared to begin the Kepler Maze. Standard safety rules apply. Call for help immediately if you need. Amy strapped herself into the small fighter's cockpit. The ship felt familiar somehow, even though it was designed for multiple alien species. Understood, Control. Beginning approach now. The first part of the course went well enough. Amy used her human intuition to read the gravitational currents around the larger asteroids. But as she went deeper into the maze, the challenges became much harder. Dense fields of spinning debris required split-second timing, while gravity wells threatened to crush her ship against jagged rocks. Disaster struck in the third section. A tiny piece of space rock, too small for her sensors to detect, punched through her right engine. Warning lights flooded her cockpit as the ship began spinning out of control toward a cluster of sharp asteroids. Rodriguez, eject now. Commander Zenth's voice crackled through the radio. Your ship cannot be saved. Amy felt the familiar burn of adrenaline flooding her system. This was the moment every human recognized but few other species understood. The point where survival instinct took over and turned ordinary people into something more than they had been before. Negative, Control, she replied. Her voice was strangely calm as she watched the asteroids rushing toward her. I'm going to try something. Instead of fighting the spin, Amy embraced it. She shut down her remaining engine and used small steering jets in controlled bursts. The asteroids that had seemed like certain death became a slalom course as she threaded between them, using their gravity to slingshot toward the maze's exit. In the control room, complete silence reigned. Even the experienced instructors had never seen anything like it. A pilot deliberately using catastrophic system failure as a navigation aid was beyond their understanding. Amy emerged from the maze with her fighter held together by emergency patches and determination. Her time wasn't record-breaking, but she had completed the course under conditions that should have been impossible to survive. As she landed in the station's hangar bay, Amy could see other students watching her through the observation windows. For the first time since arriving at Kepler Station, she didn't see pity or dismissal in their expressions. Stone that breaks waves' scales had shifted to deep gold, which she had learned was a sign of respect among his people. Commander Harrison was waiting for her as she climbed out of the damaged fighter. That was either the stupidest thing I've ever seen, he said, or the most brilliant. Amy wiped coolant fluid from her hands and grinned. Sometimes there isn't much difference between the two. That night, for the first time since arriving at the academy, Amy didn't eat dinner alone. Whisper of the Voidkin appeared at her table, its shadow form rippling with what might have been curiosity. Question requires answer, Whisper said, in its strange musical voice. Human pilot demonstrates impossible survival. Standard analysis suggests luck. Alternative interpretation suggests humans possess hidden capabilities. Amy looked up from her meal. Around the dining hall, she could feel other students listening to their conversation. Not hidden, she said quietly. Just different. You all evolved in environments where being the strongest or fastest or smartest was enough. Humans had to learn to be the most stubborn. Stone that breaks waves laughed from a nearby table, the sound like rocks falling down a mountain. Stubborn. Yes, this explains much about small human. The thing is, Amy continued, looking around at her fellow students, 2.1% isn't actually that bad when you think about it. That's about the same odds a human has of becoming a professional athlete, or a successful artist, or starting a $1 million company. We beat those odds every day back home. She stood up, carrying her tray toward the cleaning station. The difference is we've never accepted that long odds mean no chance. Every human success story starts with someone being told it's impossible. As she walked away, Amy could hear quiet conversations starting up behind her. For the first time, since arriving at Kepler Station, she felt like she belonged there. The real test, she knew, was still coming. Combat training began the following week. Unlike the maze, which tested flying skills and quick thinking, combat training was about life and death. Students would fight against each other in simulated battles using training weapons that could still cause serious injury. Amy's first opponent was Nexus 7, a machine being from the robot worlds. Its reaction times were measured in milliseconds, and it could calculate thousands of possible attack patterns in the time it took Amy to blink. The training arena was a holographic environment that could create any battlefield imaginable. For their fight, the computer chose a debris field around a destroyed space station. Combat parameters established, announced the arena's computer. Weapons set to training level. Victory conditions are to disable opponent's ship or force surrender. Begin in 3, 2, 1. Nexus 7's fighter disappeared immediately, hidden by advanced cloaking technology. Amy found herself alone in the debris field, knowing that death could come from any direction without warning. The first energy blast missed her by inches, lighting up her cockpit with red warning lights. Amy rolled her fighter into a dive toward the station wreckage, using the twisted metal for cover while her sensors searched for any trace of her opponent. Standard evasion patterns detected, Nexus 7's mechanical voice said over the radio. Human pilot exhibits predictable behavior. Combat will end in 37 seconds. Amy grimaced. Nexus 7 was right. Everything she had been taught about fighter combat followed logical, predictable patterns. But humans had never been particularly logical when their lives were on the line. She dove deeper into the wreckage, pushing her fighter through gaps that were barely wider than her ship. Behind her, she could hear the whine of Nexus 7's engines as the machine pilot followed, confident in its superior reflexes and targeting systems. Amy found what she was looking for deep in the station's core. A massive power generator, its energy field still flickering with dangerous electricity. Any rational pilot would avoid it. The electromagnetic interference would disrupt both ship systems equally, which was exactly what Amy was counting on. She flew directly into the interference field, watching her instruments die one by one as electromagnetic chaos filled her cockpit. But she had spent hours studying the destroyed station's layout, memorizing every corridor and passage. Nexus 7 followed, its confidence unshaken until its own systems began failing. For the first time in the fight, the machine pilot found itself operating without complete information. Amy burst from the power core's far side and immediately cut her engines, letting momentum carry her in a silent glide toward where she knew Nexus 7 would be. The machine's cloaking field flickered and died as its systems struggled with the interference. Week 3 brought the advanced combat tests, and with them came the reality that being smart in school meant nothing if you couldn't survive a real fight. The training arena could create any battle situation in the galaxy, from small fights in asteroid fields to massive fleet battles with hundreds of ships. Amy's new opponents were the best students from each alien species. They had been chosen specifically because the instructors wanted to see Amy fail. The Academy's computer system said it was impossible for one pilot to defeat multiple enemies at once, especially when those enemies had natural advantages that humans could never match. Her first test was against 4 opponents at the same time. There was Razorwing, a bird-like Aryan whose people could see in all directions at once. Crystal Mind was a living rock creature whose thoughts moved faster than any computer. Swift Current came from a water world and could change direction, instantly without feeling the crushing forces that would kill other pilots. Finally, there was Voidwalker, an energy being that could pass through solid matter like it wasn't there. The battle scenario was simple and brutal. Amy had to defend a small space station from the 4 attackers. If any of them reached the station and scored a direct hit, she would fail the test. The station couldn't move and had no weapons of its own. Amy was its only protection. This test has never been passed by a single pilot, Flight Commander Zenth told Amy before the simulation began. The mathematical probability of success is 0.003%. Even our best graduates required at least 2 pilots working together to complete this scenario. Amy climbed into her fighter's cockpit and ran through her pre-flight checks. Around her, the other students were taking their places in their own simulators. She could see them through the cockpit windows, and most of them looked confident. They had trained together for weeks and knew each other's fighting styles perfectly. Combat simulation beginning in 10 seconds, announced the arena computer. Defending pilot, prepare for engagement. Amy took a deep breath and gripped her ship's controls. Roger that. Defender ready. The simulation began with Amy floating in space near the small station. It looked fragile and helpless, just a cluster of metal modules connected by thin corridors. Her job was to keep it safe from 4 of the deadliest pilots in the academy. The attack came from all directions at once. Razorwing dove in from above while Crystal Mind approached from the side. Swift Current came at her from below, and Voidwalker simply appeared directly in front of the station, having passed through several asteroids to get there. Amy had about 2 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether she lived or died. Instead of trying to fight all 4 enemies at once, she did something no rational pilot would ever attempt. She flew her fighter directly at the station she was supposed to protect, firing her weapons as she approached. What is the human doing? Crystal Mind's voice crackled over the communication system. She is attacking her own objective. Amy wasn't attacking the station. She was shooting at the cargo containers attached to its outer hull. The containers exploded in sequence, creating a massive cloud of debris that spread out in all directions. Metal fragments, frozen air, and pieces of equipment formed a 3-dimensional maze around the station. Clever, small human, came Razorwing's voice. But debris field will not save you for long. Amy smiled grimly as she flew into the chaos she had created. The debris cloud had 2 effects that her opponents hadn't considered. First, it made the station almost impossible to hit accurately. Second, it gave Amy hundreds of pieces of cover to hide behind while she planned her next move. Voidwalker tried to use its ability to pass through solid matter, but the debris field was so dense that it kept materializing inside chunks of metal. Each time this happened, the energy being had to quickly shift back to non-solid form to avoid damage. Swift Current found that its ability to change direction instantly was useless when there were obstacles everywhere. The Waterworlder kept hitting pieces of debris at high speed, damaging its fighter's hull and weapon systems. Crystal Mind and Razorwing tried to coordinate their attacks, but the debris field broke up their formation and made communication difficult. They couldn't see each other or Amy through the floating wreckage. Amy used the chaos to her advantage. She had memorized the positions of the larger pieces of debris and used them as shields while she stalked her opponents one by one. Her first target was Swift Current, whose damaged ship was moving more slowly than usual. She came up behind the Waterworlder's fighter and fired a precise burst that disabled its engines. Swift Current's ship went spinning helplessly into the debris field out of the fight. 1 down, Amy muttered to herself as she searched for her next target. Voidwalker was next. The energy being was having trouble maintaining solid form long enough to use its weapons effectively. Amy waited until it materialized to take a shot at the station, then hit it with everything she had while it was vulnerable. 2 down, she said with satisfaction. Crystal Mind and Razorwing realized they were in serious trouble. They tried to retreat from the debris field and attack from long range, but Amy had anticipated this. She had positioned several large pieces of wreckage between them and the station, making accurate shots impossible. The rock creature attempted to use its superior thinking speed to calculate a path through the debris, but there were simply too many variables. The floating wreckage was constantly moving and colliding, creating new patterns faster than even Crystal Mind could process. Razorwing tried to use its all-around vision to spot Amy hiding in the debris, but Amy had learned to use the bird-like alien's greatest strength against it. She flew in erratic patterns that gave Razorwing too much information to process at once, overloading its senses. The final phase of the battle was a deadly game of hide-and-seek among the floating wreckage. Amy used her human intuition and pattern recognition to predict where her opponents would be, while they struggled with sensors that couldn't penetrate the debris field effectively. When the simulation ended, Amy's fighter was heavily damaged, but still functional. The station she had been protecting was completely intact. All 4 of her opponents had been eliminated or disabled. The training arena fell silent. In the observation booth, instructors who had seen thousands of combat simulations sat without speaking. The scenario Amy had just completed was considered impossible for a single pilot, regardless of species or training. Amy climbed out of her simulator to find a crowd of alien students waiting for her. They looked at her with expressions she had never seen before. It wasn't just respect anymore. Some of them looked genuinely afraid. Stone that breaks waves was the first to speak. "Small human fights like cornered beast," he said, his scales shifting to colors that indicated deep thought. "Creates new battlefield from existing one. Uses environment as weapon against enemies." Whisper of the Voidkin materialized beside Amy, its shadow form rippling with agitation. "Question requires immediate answer," it said. "Human pilot demonstrates capabilities beyond all projections. How does single individual overcome multiple superior opponents using inferior resources?" Amy looked around at the circle of alien faces surrounding her. These were the finest warriors their species could produce, each one equipped with natural advantages that should have made them unbeatable. Yet here they were, asking her to explain how she had done the impossible. "You're all asking the wrong question," she said finally. "You want to know how I beat 4 better pilots, but that's not what happened here." The aliens exchanged confused glances. Crystal Mind spoke up. "Clarification requested. If you did not defeat superior opponents, what occurred in the simulation?" Amy walked toward the arena's main viewport, which showed a holographic replay of the battle. "I didn't fight 4 better pilots," she said. "I created a situation where being a better pilot didn't matter anymore." She pointed at the replay showing the moment she had fired on the cargo containers. Razorwing's all-around vision became a liability when there was too much to see. Swift Current's instant direction changes became useless when there wasn't room to maneuver. Voidwalker's ability to pass through matter became dangerous when there was matter everywhere. The aliens watched the replay with growing understanding. Amy continued her explanation. Crystal Mind's superior thinking speed couldn't help when the variables were changing faster than any mind could calculate. "I didn't overcome your advantages, I made them irrelevant." Flight Commander Zenth appeared at Amy's shoulder. The insect-like commander had been watching from the instructor's booth. "Your tactics were completely outside established military doctrine," it said. "Yes, sir," Amy replied. "You destroyed valuable cargo and created a hazardous debris field around the station you were protecting." "In a simulation, sir. And the station survived intact." Commander Zenth's mandibles clicked rapidly, which Amy had learned indicated deep thought among the Hiverid people. "Your solution achieved the primary objective while ignoring all conventional tactical wisdom." Amy looked directly at the commander. "Sometimes conventional wisdom is the problem, sir." The debriefing that followed was unlike anything in the Academy's history. The briefing room was completely silent as Flight Commander Zenth explained Amy's final test. She would face 5 opponents at once in the most difficult combat scenario the Academy had ever created. The alien instructors had designed this test specifically to prove that human limitations were real and could not be overcome by clever thinking alone. Her opponents were the Academy's most skilled pilots. Stone that breaks waves would use his ability to withstand crushing forces that would kill other pilots. The Catherian twins, Sharp Eye and Quick Strike, fought with perfect coordination that came from sharing thoughts. Nexus 7 had been rebuilt, with better systems and improved targeting computers. Whisper of the Voidkin could phase through solid matter and appear anywhere without warning. The mission scenario, Commander Zenth announced, its insect-like voice clicking with anticipation, is defense of the medical convoy Hope's Journey. 3 cargo ships carrying life-saving supplies to a frontier colony. Cadet Rodriguez will pilot the convoy's only escort fighter, while enemy forces attempt to destroy the medical ships. Amy studied the tactical display floating above the briefing table. The convoy consisted of 3 slow, clumsy cargo vessels loaded with medicine and medical equipment. Her job was to protect them from 5 fast, deadly fighters until help could arrive. Military doctrine said this mission required at least 4 escort ships working together. Rules of engagement, Amy asked. Standard training protocols, Commander Zenth replied. Simulated weapons only. Your fighter will be considered destroyed if you take critical damage. The cargo ships will be lost if they sustain more than minor hull damage. Stone that breaks waves. Scales rippled with excited gold patterns. Finally, small human will learn that some challenges cannot be overcome by trickery. Amy nodded calmly. Maybe, or maybe you'll learn why humans survived long enough to reach the stars. The combat simulation began with Amy flying patrol around the 3 medical ships as they moved slowly through a dangerous asteroid field. The cargo captains were controlled by the Academy's computer systems, programmed to act like real civilian crews who were scared and completely dependent on their military escort. Escort fighter, this is Hope's Journey lead ship, came the voice of the convoy commander. We're detecting multiple hostile contacts on our sensors. Can you confirm? Amy checked her tactical display. 5 enemy fighters were approaching fast, from different directions using the floating asteroids for cover. Her opponents had planned their attack perfectly. By coming from multiple angles, they forced her to choose between protecting individual ships or trying to cover the entire convoy. Poorly. Hope's Journey, this is your escort, Amy replied, keeping her voice steady despite the terrible odds. I have contact with hostiles. Maintain your current course and speed. Stay in formation and do exactly what I tell you. The first attack came from Nexus 7, diving out of the asteroid field with all weapons firing. Amy intercepted the machine. Pilot's attack, trading shots as she maneuvered to stay between the attacker and the medical ships. But while she was fighting Nexus 7, the Catherian twins struck from the opposite side. Their perfectly coordinated assault nearly broke through her defenses before she could turn to face the new threat. Escort fighter, we're taking damage, screamed the captain of Hope's Journey. Our cargo bay is losing air. Amy watched her tactical screen with growing concern. The twins had scored minor hits on the lead medical ship. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to slow it down and make it an easier target. Meanwhile, Stone that breaks waves was moving into position for a killing strike against the convoy's rear ship. This was the moment every instructor expected her to fail. Faced with impossible odds and losing her mission, any rational pilot would surrender and accept defeat with honor. Amy did something completely different. Hope's Journey, this is escort, she transmitted to the cargo ships. Emergency Protocol 99 Charlie. Execute immediately. There was confused silence before. The convoy commander responded. Escort, there is no Protocol 99 Charlie in our emergency procedures. There is now, Amy said grimly. Dump your cargo, all of it, right now. Are you crazy? The captain shouted. That cargo is worth millions of credits. Less than your lives, Amy cut him off. Dump everything and prepare for emergency acceleration. You're about to become the fastest cargo ships in the galaxy. What happened next shocked every observer in the Academy's control room. As the medical ships began ejecting their cargo, Amy flew directly into the expanding cloud of supplies, equipment, and medicine containers. The debris created a 3-dimensional maze that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Her opponents suddenly found themselves fighting in a completely different battle. The precise attack patterns they had planned were now blocked by spinning cargo containers and floating medical equipment. Whisper of the Voidkin's ability to phase through matter became dangerous when there was solid material everywhere. The Catherian twins lost their coordination as the debris field broke up their formation. Amy turned the chaos into her weapon. She used floating cargo containers as shields and battering rams. A well-placed shot sent a heavy equipment crate spinning into stone that breaks waves as flight path, forcing the Draknari warrior to break off his attack. She bounced laser blasts off reflective surfaces, creating indirect fire that confused Nexus 7's targeting systems. This violates all established combat doctrine, Nexus 7 transmitted, its mechanical voice carrying what sounded like frustration. The use of civilian cargo as weapons is against military law. So report me, Amy replied, using a spinning medical scanner as cover while she lined up a shot on the Catherian twins. If there's anyone left to file the complaint, the battle that followed would be studied by military schools across the galaxy for years to come. Amy had transformed a hopeless defensive mission into something like three-dimensional guerrilla warfare. She used the debris field to neutralize her opponent's advantages, while the now empty cargo ships accelerated away from the battle zone at speeds no loaded vessel could achieve. Sharp Eye, one of the Catherian twins, made the mistake of flying too close to a cluster of spinning cargo containers. Amy fired at the containers instead of the ship, creating a chain reaction that sent debris flying in all directions. The Catherian pilot's ship was caught in the storm of metal and electronics, taking damage that forced it out of the fight. Whisper of the Voidkin tried to use its phasing ability to appear inside Amy's fighter, but she had anticipated this. She flew through a dense cluster of medical equipment, and when Whisper materialized, it found itself sharing space with a surgical robot. The collision damaged both the alien pilot and its ship severely. Stone that breaks waves, frustrated by his inability to get a clear shot, charged straight through the debris field using his species' natural resistance to crushing forces. But Amy had been waiting for this. She guided him toward a cluster of the heaviest cargo containers, and then fired at the connecting cables holding them together. The Draknari pilot found himself trapped in a cage of spinning metal, unable to break free without destroying his own ship's weapon systems. Quickstrike, the remaining Catherian twin, tried to avenge its partner by attacking Amy directly, but without its twin's coordination, the alien pilot was just another good fighter facing a human who had already proven that being good wasn't enough. Amy used a damaged cargo container as a club, ramming it into Quickstrike's fighter with enough force to disable the ship's engines and weapons. When the simulation ended, Amy's fighter was running on backup power and held together by emergency repairs, but all three medical ships had successfully escaped the battle zone. Her 5 opponents had been reduced to floating wrecks and systems failures. The observation deck was packed with instructors, senior students, and visiting military officials who had come to watch what everyone expected to be Amy's final defeat. Instead, they had witnessed a single human pilot rewrite the basic rules of space combat. Flight Commander Zenth was the first to speak as Amy climbed out of her simulator. "Cadet Rodriguez," it said slowly, "your tactical approach was completely unprecedented." "Yes, sir," Amy replied, swaying slightly from exhaustion. "You destroyed millions of credits worth of medical supplies." "In a simulation, sir, and the ship survived to deliver future supplies." The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly, indicating deep thought. "Your solution achieved the primary mission objective while ignoring all conventional military wisdom." Amy looked around the observation deck at the assembled alien officers and instructors. Many were staring at her with expressions that mixed respect, concern, and something that might have been fear. "With respect, sir," she said finally, "maybe conventional military wisdom needs updating." The debriefing session that followed was unlike anything in the Academy's history. Amy found herself surrounded by xenopsychologists, strategic analysts, and military historians, all trying to understand how a single human had achieved victory through methods their computers couldn't predict or duplicate. The statistical models predicted a 0.001% probability of mission success. Dr. Vex, a crystal-like academic, observed while reviewing the combat data. Yet Cadet Rodriguez achieved victory through tactics that our analysis systems could not anticipate. 6 months after graduation, Amy Rodriguez sat in the cockpit of a brand-new interceptor fighter aboard the USS Defiance. The ship was humanity's newest addition to the Galactic Defense Fleet, with a crew made up of both humans and aliens. When Amy had first been assigned to the ship, the crew had watched her with curiosity, but word of her Academy achievements had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The emergency call came during what should have been a routine patrol near the edge of known space. A research station called New Harmony was under attack by unknown, hostile forces that had appeared from the dark void beyond the galaxy's rim. "All fighters, this is Defiance Control," came the voice of Commander Lisa Chen over the squadron radio. "We have multiple enemy contacts attacking New Harmony Station. Estimated time to reach the battle 30 minutes. This is not a drill." Amy strapped herself into her fighter and began running through her pre-flight checks. Around her in the launch bay, pilots from a dozen different species prepared their ships for combat. The mixed squadron represented the best the Galactic Defense Fleet could offer. "Rodriguez," called Lieutenant Ben Parker from the fighter next to hers. He was a young human pilot, fresh from Earth and full of untested confidence. "Heard about your Academy reputation. Think you can pull off the same magic against real enemies?" Amy looked through her cockpit window at the eager young pilot. Ben reminded her of herself when she had first arrived at Kepler Station, sure that determination alone could overcome any obstacle. "Let's hope we don't need magic," she replied. "But if we do, I'll see what I can manage." The flight to New Harmony revealed the true scope of the crisis. The research station was surrounded by ships unlike anything in the galactic military databases. The enemy vessels were angular and predatory, moving with unnatural coordination, and displaying technology that seemed to break several known laws of physics. "Dear God," whispered Lieutenant Parker, as the hostile fleet came into view. "There must be 100 of them." Amy studied her tactical display, counting enemy contacts, and analyzing their attack patterns. The unknown ships had formed a perfect sphere around New Harmony Station, maintaining precise distances that suggested either incredible discipline or some kind of shared control system. "Defiance Squadron, this is Wing Commander Thrace," came the voice of their Catherian flight leader. "We are outnumbered 10 to 1 against unknown hostiles with superior technology. Military doctrine suggests we wait for the main fleet to arrive." Amy activated her communication system. "Commander, this is Rodriguez. New Harmony won't last that long. They're already showing critical structural damage on my sensors." "Noted. Lieutenant. However, tactical analysis indicates our forces are insufficient for direct engagement against such overwhelming odds." Through her fighter's window, Amy could see the research station's defensive shields flickering under constant bombardment. New Harmony housed 5,000 scientists, researchers, and support staff who had dedicated their lives to expanding the boundaries of galactic knowledge. They deserved better than to die while their rescuers waited for better odds. "Commander Thrace," Amy said, her voice carrying across the entire squadron frequency. "Permission to attempt a diversionary attack?" There was a long pause before the Catherian replied. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, your Academy records suggest highly unconventional approaches to tactical problems. What do you propose?" Amy smiled as she checked her fighter's weapons and defensive systems. "Something those things won't expect, sir. Something human." What Amy did next would be remembered as one of the most daring single-pilot actions in galactic military history. Instead of joining the squadron's formation for a coordinated attack, she dove her fighter straight toward the system's primary star, accelerating to dangerous speeds as she used the star's massive gravity to build momentum. "Rodriguez, what are you doing?" Lieutenant Parker's voice crackled over the radio. "You're flying straight at the sun." "Not at it," Amy replied, her voice strangely calm as her fighter's hull temperature began climbing toward critical levels. "Around it." She had studied stellar mechanics extensively during her Academy training, learning how gravity wells could be used to achieve otherwise impossible velocities. But no pilot had ever attempted what she was trying now, using a star's gravitational field as a slingshot to reach attack speeds that would turn her fighter into a guided missile. The enemy fleet, focused on their systematic destruction of New Harmony Station, didn't notice the small human fighter diving toward the star. Their sensors were designed to track conventional threats, not suicidal pilots using stellar physics as a weapon. Amy's fighter screamed around the star's edge at a significant fraction of light speed. The gravitational slingshot effect had accelerated, her far beyond anything the enemy ships could match. She emerged from behind the star like a bullet fired from the heavens themselves. The first enemy ship never saw her coming. Amy's fighter struck it at such tremendous velocity that both ships simply vaporized in a brilliant flash of energy. The explosion was so intense that it temporarily overloaded the sensors of every ship in the area. What was that? Commander. Thrace's voice carried shock and amazement. Rodriguez, report your status. But Amy was already gone, consumed in the explosion that had destroyed her target. For a moment, the entire battle paused as both sides tried to understand what had just happened. Then Lieutenant Parker's voice cut through the confusion. She did it, he said quietly. She actually did it. The young pilot's fighter accelerated toward the enemy formation, followed by the rest of the squadron. Amy's sacrifice had shown them something they hadn't understood before. The unknown enemies, for all their advanced technology and superior numbers, could be hurt. They could be beaten, but Amy Rodriguez was not dead. The explosion that had vaporized her fighter had also created a massive electromagnetic pulse that disabled sensors throughout the battle area. In the confusion that followed, no one noticed the small escape pod that had ejected from Amy's fighter at the last possible second. Amy had calculated the timing perfectly. The pod's tiny thrusters carried her clear of the explosion while her fighter's momentum completed the ramming attack. She floated in the darkness, watching through her pod's small window as the battle turned in favor of the Galactic Defense Fleet. Her seemingly suicidal attack had broken the enemy formation and given the other pilots the opening they needed. The unknown ships, faced with opponents who fought with human-like determination, began to retreat toward the edge of the galaxy. "This is Amy Rodriguez," she transmitted as her pod's emergency beacon activated. "Requesting pickup. Sorry for the dramatic exit, but someone had to knock on their door." The rescue took 3 hours. When Amy was finally brought aboard the Defiance, she found the entire crew waiting in the hangar bay. Humans and aliens alike stood in respectful silence as she climbed out of the rescue pod. Captain Martinez, the Defiance's commanding officer, was the first to speak. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," he said formally, "your actions today saved 5,000 lives and demonstrated tactical innovation that will be studied for generations." Amy looked around at the assembled crew. She could see admiration in their faces, but also something else. The aliens looked at her with a mixture of respect and wariness that she had seen before at the academy. "Just doing my job, sir," she replied simply. But everyone knew it was more than that. Word of Amy's stellar slingshot attack spread throughout the fleet within hours. The story grew with each telling until it became the stuff of legend. The human pilot who had used a star as a weapon, the woman who had turned physics itself into her ally. 6 months later, Amy found herself back on Earth for the first time since leaving for the academy. She stood before a joint session of Congress wearing her new uniform, with the rank insignia of a full commander. The promotion had come with her assignment as the first human instructor at the Galactic Defense Academy. "The question before us today," said Senator Williams, the chairman of the Defense Committee, "is whether we should establish a separate human military doctrine or continue trying to fit our people into alien tactical frameworks." Amy looked out at the assembled politicians and military leaders. Through the windows of the Capitol building, she could see the lights of Washington, D.C. stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there, millions of humans were going about their daily lives, unaware that their species had just proven itself to be something unique in the galaxy. "With respect, Senator," Amy said, "I don't think we need separate doctrine. We just need to remember what makes us human." She activated a holographic display showing the battle at New Harmony. Every other species in the galaxy fights to maximize their natural advantages. They try to be faster, stronger, or smarter than their opponents. But humans fight differently. The hologram showed her fighter diving toward the star. "We fight to win regardless of the cost. We turn our weaknesses into strengths and our limitations into weapons. We do things that computers say are impossible, because we've never accepted that impossible means impossible." Senator Williams leaned forward. Are you saying that human tactical thinking is inherently superior to that of other species?